Chapter 59. The surveyors return to the North Mountain at the end of March to find the Shelby seat engulfed as ever in turmoil. 6 neighbours having but lately petitioned Governor Sharp to remove him and his coadjutor, Mr. Joseph Warford, as justices of the peace. The captain's secular woes have multiplied sensibly toward a state of irremediable chaos, owing to the great scandal over the winter, involving Tom Hines, Catherine Wheat, and their baby. You recall how last September, not long before you boys arrived, Conrad Wheat, one of our distillers hereabouts, his girl Catherine, goes up before Captain Price, holding in her arms a newborn baby, swearing under oath that Tom Hines is the father. She doesn't appear at November court in Frederickstown, so the matter's put over till March. Tom wonders what she's up to. Some other swain behind the smokehouse he don't know about? He's all perplexed. His own father is happy to advise him. This is my grandson. Know what that means? No, sir. A grandson means a man can quit worrying at last. Means the chain goes on unbroken. The miracle of fatherhood. That's as long as the little sucker's daddy ain't some contemptible fool who'd gladly run away, but for his own father, who'd beat him so roundly he'd be running nowhere for a long while, of course. What? Tom agape. Marry the bitch? We dwell among people of the kirk, lad, advises the elder Hines, recalling the sampler your dear mother made that hangs o'er the hearth. Expect Indians, nods Tom. Exactly in the same daily spirit must a man, aye, and woman too, at every moment, expect lawsuits out here from any direction, for any reason or none. In a Presbyterian world, 'tis best to keep a tidy life. Marry her. She'd never have me, proving she's got good sense. All the more reason why you need to marry her. Now tonight, I'm going to lock you in this shed here. Dad! Tonight, Tom, you must be sober and alone with your soul, not out rowdy-dowing. Take note, I've been holding back the hickory so far. This is too important. Think about it. So young Hines obeys, though his thoughts aren't quite as spiritual as his father might have hoped. Rather, Tom, through these dark hours, slowly pieces together what, even in the sunlight of the next day, to his reddened eyes, continues to look like a clever plan. Forget the bitch, he announces. We'll seize the baby, dashing off before William can comment, to call upon Captain Shelby and ask him, as Peace Commissioner, to write him a warrant to repossess the baby. The captain, hearing the story, is amused. His blood gets to racing at the possibility of yet another lawsuit. He goes through a great rigmarole with good paper, pens and inks of several colours, and wax seals as well, and Tom, who can't read any of it, figures he's as good as got that baby in his hands. That Monday night, about 9 or 10, they go to serve the instrument. Tom and the constable, along with Murren, Dawson, a couple of others, Nathan Lynn and John Gurlow show up at Wheat's house, pretending at first they only want a quart of whiskey. 6 of them. They're planning to share a quart? The German, suspicious already, now spies Tom Hines among the company. A pint only I can sell you. Well, come on out here, Conrad. We want to talk to you about something. No, we want you to look at something. Conrad thinks about it. There are women and children in the house. His nearest pistol is too far away. He shrugs and steps into the night, leaving the door open a little with only the thrusts of light from candles inside, moving to and fro to see by. "We've come for the baby, Conrad," says Constable Barney Johnson. "Will you give him up?" "Why should I?" "Court order." "May I see it?" "Too dark." "Read it to me." Barney sighs. "Here, Moran, you've the lantern." What Shelby wrote proves to be a search warrant for stolen goods, more of the Welshman's peculiar notions of mirth. Catherine pops out the door to remind the constable that her child ain't goods, stolen or however. Tom, jumping down off his horse, goes after her, and she slams the door in his face. Everybody's feeling edgy. "Who signed this order?" Conrad shouts. "Don't tell him anything," warns Tom in a temper. "Tom, 'tis all legal," says the constable. "And Conrad, now, the warrant is Captain Shelby's, but—" "Shelby! Some court order! Barnet! Shame so! Captain Shelby's demand! More of his bullying! It means nothing. My daughter has already given security to Justice Price, and her child is safe here. Catherine Wheat, having failed to show up in Justice Price's court last month," Constable Johnson in a small, hurried voice proclaims, "is deemed in violation of the law, and pending disposition for the good of the child must I order my deputies to lay hands upon it forthwith." "Lay hands upon this!" cries one of the girls of the house, and shakes out a great wing of dishwater, whose pinguid embrace not all escape, whilst another sets the hounds who live in the back upon the party. The house of a sudden is seen to be filled with more people than anyone might have imagined. "Why then, Conrad, I am personally saddened to think you would lie thus in wait for us." The constable, unable to finish his thought, as he must struggle to remain atop his mount. Out the door, and a window or two as well, come Barclay, Steed, and the Rush brothers, Brooks and Flint remaining within to see to the ladies, advancing upon the constable's men, who with back-country whoops come a-charging, cudgels ready to strike, Tom in his not altogether subdued way screaming, "He's mine, bitch, and I'll have him alive or dead." One of Wheat's boys, roughly pushed, falls, is hurt. A sister swoops in to snatch the baby and bring him in his swaddling, looking like a little stuffed cabbage leaf, back to the kitchen, whilst the others in the house shut and bar the door, though not for long, as the rioters, close behind, begin breaking it in. The boy has a compress of arnica tea upon his thump by now, and will be all right. Conrad has a lot invested in the door, which he's carpentered, carved, and hung all with his one set of hands. He watches, not yet able to believe that these men he thought he knew could become a band of raiders who mean him harm, and his grandson as well. It seems, for now, in this ear-battering kitchen melee, the baby is suddenly become a ball in a game, being tossed in short, high arcs from one party to another about the house, as the Shelbyites go beating upon anyone in their reach, injuring some so badly they won't make it into court. No more hazardous than the usual North Mountain wedding, young Tom is beating the mother of his child, informing her in a voice not entirely in his control of his intention to kill her. Passionate lad, though not in any way women are apt to find welcome, is it? Nathan Lynn grabs the baby and runs out the door. Then one of Wheat's women, chasing after, gets him back, runs on into the field with Barney after her, and John Gurlow close behind. They catch her and beat her till she gives the child up. All out in the dark where they can't see her as well as they could back in the candlelight. They've no sense of depth here and don't know how hard to strike. All are phantoms to one another. At last she reclines in a frozen furrow, weeping, trying to get one of them to look her in the face. Gurlow will not, and Barney is too occupied with the baby, who, upon assessing the constable, has begun to cry. Well, cry is perhaps not it exactly. All the way to Ralph Matson's house, that little banshee lets out a protest that echoes for miles off these hills. Irish folk cross themselves, needlewomen drop stitches, not to mention bow. For the days then teetered round us all, comments Captain Shelby. We'd soon enough ourselves be upon the march from Fredericktown down to Annapolis, riding as a troop 2 and 3 abreast, with inexpensive comparisons made to the Paxton boys, though 'twas the stamp dispute that brought us out, and whether the Assembly would pass its journal. Tom's domestic drama gave us a practice run, as you'd say, for acts of public necessity impending. At last they convey the goods successfully across to Matson's upon the Pennsylvania side. Captain Shelby's there waiting with Will Hines, the baby crying to chill the bones of Pontiac himself. "Give it here, Barney," says the captain. "You're doing that all wrong," and takes the baby, who abruptly falls silent, gazing up at the captain's eyebrows. "Ah, you like that, do you? Can't say you look much like a Hines, just as well." He orbs one by one the bleeding, dishevelled escort. "Do I take it the mother was unwilling to give the infant up?" "I made the Dutch bitch's blood fly," Tom Hines informs the company. "Say it 3 times quickly, Tom, and we'll believe you." "That, incidentally, is the exclamation verbatim," Uncle Ives here asserts. "See Proceedings of the Council of Maryland for the year 65. Your uncle has been telling the story as deposed much later by people wishing to have Shelby dismissed as a peace officer, perhaps to get even for some wrong committed during the crisis attending the Stamp Act, or perhaps more ancient. But here he crossed a line. A Pennsylvanian raid upon a Maryland farmer. 'Twas more than whose warrant should have effect where Shelby ignored the power of the line and chose to defy it. So it became a matter for Annapolis. "'Tis all there," allows the Reverend, "the whole squalid tale, transcending the usual neighbourly resentment, tied into that strange rising of spirit throughout the countryside, from a certain cock of the hat to the refusal of all further belief in boundaries or British government, a willed departure from history." Captain Shelby's personal peeve is the lack of respect for his signature upon writs and orders, which he seems to run into at every turn, either side of the line. The law, in its majesty, can look after itself. 'Tis the disrespect for him personally that Shelby cannot abide. "Damn the Dutchman! He'd better stay over there in Maryland, or he'll be well thrashed, refusing my writ, Good thing I wasn't along with you, Barney. I'd have burned his house down. No one reminds him that he wrote the baby repossession order in jest. He refuses, in turn, to accept security from Flint and Brooks on behalf of the Wheat Girl. If my writ means nothing over there, why should your security mean any more over here? Taking instead the Hineses' note for £100 as bond to keep the baby off the parish. The captain's troubles are not over, for now Conrad Wheat brings suit over the riot at his house, obliging all parties to show up at Justice Warford's house for a hearing preliminary to court. Tom Hines, the merry bachelor, though bobbing cork-like as ever, beginning to feel remorse, no longer alludes to his recent bloodletting activities. No one wants to hear about it anyway. When the moment to appear before the justice arrives at last, he's all but desperate to see Kate. Shelby comes in a-bellowing after a warrant for Catherine Wheat's fine. Mrs. Warford advises against it, replies Joseph Warford. Her gifts in this area being widely known. And, Evan, don't try to squeeze this one dry, for there's not that much in it. Damn Joe, my old colleague at law, his worthy wife at whose table I've ever been happy to dine. Betrayed! Who'd have thought it of either one here? Hey, Will? Hey, Tom? Tom? Tom Hines is not immediately visible. Amazingly to all, Mrs. Warford and a resolute candle flame reveal the North Mountain Casanova retired to a stuffed chair in a dim corner with Catherine Wheat upon his lap, whilst he strokes her intently. You wounded me, she is advising him. I was bleeding. I've the marks yet. Here, can you see my back? 'Twas but a willow switch, and you were curled up so tight, I'd never harm you, Katy. Why, you lying snake, of course you would, and you did. How was I supposed to feel, everyone staring, without even telling me first? You just went to Captain Price. I believed it our own secret, child, the secret of our love, that no one need know. Are you crazy? Hide a baby? You know what babies are, Net? You've been in the house with ours for even a minute. What secret? Well, maybe I know that now. Maybe I was young then. Maybe even foolish. Then was 3 months ago. You could have just married me then. Saved us all this. She doesn't care by now who thinks what. Not even Tom, whom she is looking schlag in the eye. Firmly propelled from behind by his wife, her version of a suggestive nudge, Mr. Warford abruptly enters the tete-a-tete, rumbling, Hines, as you have spoiled this girl, and taken her credit from her, you ought to marry her. Both young people regard the avuncular apparition and the bobbing arc of faces behind with strangely calmed expressions. She rests her head upon Hines's shoulder, exhales, and continues to gaze at the company, her face, if not smug, then at least innocently relaxing after a long struggle. So, Tom, a confidence in her voice he's never heard, but were he quicker might have felt concerned about. What do you think, my boiled potato? Oh, his face draped in a slow daze. I haven't much against it. Sure, I'll consider it. Intending to offer 25, but moved by the spirit of the room, Conrad Wheat declares, Ye shall have £30 from me, and a £5 wedding sew. Hurrah! Cries Mrs. Warford. Now, when were you thinking of, young man, exactly? When? Tom Hines, not sure what today's date is, notes with some alarm that All this whole rioting, baby-snatching, litigious time, it has been Christmas-tide. Has Christmas come and gone, and he's missed it in all the commotion? Before year's end, Mrs., he supposes. "Just a minute," cries Captain Shelby, who's been busy scribbling. The merriment subsides. "There's yet this matter of the girl's fine. Joe, if you'll not write me a warrant, perhaps you'll at least kindly sign one of my own here." Mr. Warford peers over at his wife, who for the second time tonight de-superpolicates with a mischievous though unwavering smile for the captain. "Sorry." "I don't know how much more, as a man, I can really take of this," mutters the Welshman. "Damned Dutchman with his 5-pound ridottos and his Indian corn poison. Oh, much too grand to comply with my lawful writ. And now, old Joe, you refuse me once again, and then again, this night am I thrice denied. Then damn, I'll sign it myself. There, now someone, seize the young lady forthwith." "My pleasure," cries the dim Tom Hines, clasping his sweetheart, who squeals. Will Hines frowns at Shelby. "What new thievery's this?" "I'll take your note happily, Tom," the captain prompts. "Dad?" "I think he wants you to be here for the wedding," explains Will Hines. "Before the year is out," intones Mrs. W. Thus, upon the night of December 31st, all are gathered at Mr. Warford's house in clean clothes and hopeful spirits. Snow drifts in the corners of window panes distant from the fire. Mrs. Warford has made a great dark, spirit-soaked fruit cake and iced it for good measure in bridal white. Conrad Wheat has brought a wagon load of his lately run Conolaway's white, whose drinking requires close attention, lest it prove but one more way of falling asleep. Stamp Act rumours fly among small gatherings of young men in and out of doorways. An assortment of Colothumpians are here, with a full battery of cowbells tuned to the pentatonic scale, drums with possum skin heads, whistles and gongs, and a military bugle found in the woods after Braddock's defeat. "Not as cold as last winter this time, do you remember? Cold enough for me. Never hoped to see another one like that. This morning my dogs wanted to stay in. Your dogs have to lean against the wall to bark, Gus." Captain Shelby recites the service as if it were poetry. "Will you, Tom Hines, take Catherine Wheat to your lawful wedded wife?" "Aye, sir, I will." "And Catherine Wheat, Tom Hines, to your lawful wedded husband?" "I will." "Then, barring some further act of disrespect toward yet another signature of mine, acting within my authority as officer of the peace, I am delighted to be able to pronounce, jump, dog, leap, bitch, and I'll be damned if all the men on earth can unmarry you." "Tell him, Captain." "Oh, Tom, you've broken my heart." "And several others as well." The fiddler raises his bow and attacks the black joke. Feet rediscover steps that are their own, and not those of the day and its demands. When Tom wakes next morning, only slowly recognizing the bed Mrs. Warford is charging him 5 shillings for, the first thing he notices is the wallpaper, patterned all over with identical small blue flowers, upon a ground of glowing vermilion. He lies there for a long time in the crescent light, doing nothing but regarding this floral repetition. He finds that if he comes close enough to the wall and lets his eyes drift slightly out of focus, each blossom will divide in 2, and these slide away to each side until recombining with a neighbour, and that the new-made images appear now to have depth, making an array of solid objects suspended in a quivering, bright ether. It may have been a difficult night. Only one or two things stand out. He does recall Captain Shelby performing the marriage. He looks over beside him now, and sure enough, there's Katy asleep, with an egg-shaped drop of sunlight about to touch her shoulder. So that was real. He also recalls getting up in the middle of the night to piss, and being confronted with a figure he at first imagined as the devil, because it bears a pitchfork, but which he presently recognizes as Captain Shelby. "Been waiting, Mr. Hines. Thought you'd never come. Look at them, they're all asleep." In every dark nook lay revellers, under and upon the furniture and stairs. "All except me. I'm the only one who stayed up, for I knew you'd try to escape. Now, get your arse back into that chamber, and if you dare to leave your lawful wife, tonight or ever, this," waving the fork, "gets jobbed in your guts. Are we in agreement?" "Captain, all I got up for was to piss, and I was thinking more of outside the judge's house than in." "Why didn't you say so? Come on then, we'll see. We'll go piss in the snow." Threading their way among snoring celebrants, trying not to blunder onto drooling faces or disarranged skirts, they go outside, and together piss in the snow. Shelby writes his name sweepingly, as if at the bottom of some blank and all-powerful warrant of the winter, whilst Tom draws a simple heart, unpierced, unlettered, whose outline he fills in carefully, completely, and then some. The captain looks over. "You certainly didn't have to piss. Hallelujah! Attend me. Give up the pleasures of town. Those brick defiles are not for you. Your fate lies rather to the west. When those surveyors return in the spring, they'll be needing hands. You can be head of Shelby's men, a sort of party within the party. What say you?" "Did me a service," Tom Hines will declare when anyone asks. "I'm forever obliged to the captain. Catherine Wheat is the best thing that ever happened to me. Without her I'd be lost. He sure knew what was best." They are reluctant to quit the freezing night. Tom asks quietly, "May she come along?" "She'll be in foal again, hey?" "Forgot about that." Shelby regards him silently and at length. "I had ye calculated for a renegado. Why, you're gonna be another damned grandfather Cressup, Tom. You'll see." End of chapter.